Welcome back to HOA Debrief. I thought it would be a warning, it was a campaign. I moved to Northwind Meadows Terrace Association in Chicago in late November because the gym I manage opened a new location, and I needed to be 10 minutes away for the early shift. The community looked clean, the dues seemed reasonable, and the website promised organized snow removal and secure entry gates. What I did not know was that the HOA ran snow patrol after every storm, looking for violations like a scavenger hunt, and that the vice president treated every flake like a personal insult. Her name was Cynthia Wilson, but everyone called her Patricia behind her back because she insisted on formal address in public and then signed every notice with both names like a royal decree. She was the HOA vice president, and she treated the covenants like gospel. The first time I saw her, she was standing in my driveway at 6 a.m, pointing at a kid's sled I had leaned against my garage door after helping a neighbor's son dig his bike out of a snowbank the night before. She was holding a clipboard with a blank form and a key ring jangling loudly every time she gestured. "You cannot store outdoor equipment in visible locations during winter months," she said. "You signed the covenants, now you live the covenants." I blinked at her through the freezing fog. "It is a sled. It has been there for 8 hours. She clicked her pen 3 times. 8 hours is long enough to constitute storage. I am documenting this as a winter violation. You will receive a formal notice within 48 hours. I opened my mouth to argue, but she turned and walked away, her key ring jangling like a warning bell. I grabbed the sled and tossed it inside the garage, then checked my phone. I had 30 minutes to get to the gym or I would miss the morning open, and in a snow emergency zone, if my car got towed, I would lose the job. I did not have time to chase her down, so I drove to work and assumed it would blow over. It did not blow over. 2 days later, I came home from a double shift and found a door hanger notice zip-tied to my front handle. The plastic was covered in snow, and when I peeled it off, the text inside read like a ransom note. No date, no rule citation, just a vague reference to outdoor storage violation and a demand for $250 within 10 days or the fine would double and the board would escalate enforcement. There was no signature, just a printed HOA logo with Northwind Meadows Terrace Association underneath. I took a photo and went inside, my hands shaking from cold and frustration. I called the management company the next morning. The woman on the phone sounded tired. She put me on hold 3 times, then came back and said the notice was issued by the board under the Winter Compliance Program, and I should respond in writing if I wanted to dispute it. I asked for a copy of the Winter Compliance Program, and she said it was in the handbook. I pulled up the handbook PDF on my phone. There was no Winter Compliance Program. There was a section on exterior maintenance that mentioned seasonal decorations and trash cans, but nothing about sleds or temporary placement. I sent an email to the management company with screenshots and asked for clarification. The reply came back in 2 hours. The board has discretion to interpret rules during winter months to protect property values and safety. Your response has been noted. That was when I realized this was not about rules. It was about control. I ignored the notice. I figured if they wanted to escalate, they would have to prove the violation first, and I had photos showing the sled was gone within an hour of her visit. But Patricia did not let it drop. 3 days later, I got a second door hanger notice, this time with a new violation. Failure to respond to HOA correspondence. The fine was now $500. And the notice said the board was authorized to place a lien on the property if payment was not received within 7 days. I called the management company again. This time, a different person answered. He sounded annoyed before I even finished explaining. "Sir, the board has the authority to issue fines for covenant violations. If you want to dispute the fine, you need to request a hearing in writing." I sent the hearing request that night, but I did not hear back. Instead, I got a letter in the mail 2 days later. It was on law firm letterhead, and it was full of bluff language about unpaid assessments, violation history, and the association's right to pursue all available remedies including foreclosure. The letter demanded immediate payment of $500 plus a $100 administrative fee, and it gave me 5 days to respond or the matter would proceed to legal action. I read the letter twice, then called the number at the bottom. A receptionist answered, and I asked to speak to the attorney who signed it. She put me on hold, then came back and said the attorney was unavailable but she could take a message. I told her I wanted to know what violation history they were referring to, because I had lived there for 3 weeks and the only notice I received was about a sled that I moved the same day. She said she would pass the message along. I did not hear back. The next morning I left for work at 5:30 and found Patricia standing at the neighborhood gate keypad, blocking the exit lane. There were 3 cars behind me, all idling, and she was holding her clipboard like a shield. She walked up to my window and knocked on the glass. I rolled it down halfway, and cold air rushed in. "You need to pay the outstanding fines before you can leave the property," she said. "That is not how this works," I said. "You cannot block a public exit." "This is private property," she said. "The gate system is controlled by the association, and I have the authority to restrict access for residents in violation of the covenants. You signed the covenants, now you live the covenants." I looked at the line of cars behind me. One of them honked. Patricia did not move. I pulled out my phone and started recording. She stepped back and shielded her face with the clipboard. "You are harassing me," she said. "I am documenting this." "I am documenting you blocking a fire lane," I said. "Move or I am calling the police." She stood there for another 10 seconds, then stepped aside and waved me through. I drove out and called the police non-emergency line on the way to work. The dispatcher said they could send an officer to take a report, but blocking a private gate was a civil matter unless there was an immediate safety risk. I thanked her and hung up, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I had to be at work by 6 or the gym would not open on time, and if that happened, I would get written up. A snow emergency tow would get me fired, because I could not afford a replacement car and there was no public transit that ran early enough. I could not let Patricia box me in, but I also could not afford to fight this alone. If you are enjoying this story, hit the like button and subscribe so you do not miss the next HOA nightmare. That night I went through every email, every photo, every notice. I built a timeline in a spreadsheet and I started cross-referencing the dates with the weather reports and my work schedule. The first notice had been issued the morning after a 6-inch snowfall, but my driveway was clear and the sled was gone by 7. The second notice had been issued 3 days later, but there was no new violation. The attorney letter referenced a violation history that did not exist, and the lien threat was based on unpaid fines that had never gone through a hearing process. I also noticed something else. The door hanger notices kept reappearing on my handle, even after I took them down. One morning I found a fresh notice zip-tied to the handle at 5:45, which meant someone had placed it there in the dark, in freezing fog before I left for work. I started checking my doorbell camera footage, but the angle did not cover the side door where the notices were appearing. Then my neighbor, a guy named Rick who lived 2 houses down, stopped me in the driveway one afternoon. He was wearing a heavy coat and holding a snow shovel, and he looked uncomfortable. "Hey," he said, "I do not want to get involved, but you should know something. My doorbell camera caught Patricia at your place 2 nights ago. She was putting something on your door. I saved the clip if you want it." I stared at him. "What time?" "Around 1 in the morning," he said. "She was wearing her coat and carrying a clipboard. She was at your door for maybe 30 seconds, then she left." "Send me the clip," I said. He nodded and pulled out his phone. "I will text it to you. And listen, I am not the only one. She has been hitting everyone on this street with winter violations. Half the block got fines for snow pile placement, and nobody knows what rule we are breaking. The board is making it up as they go." I thanked him and went inside. The clip arrived 10 minutes later. I watched it 3 times. The timestamp was clear, and so was Patricia's face. She was placing a notice on my door in the middle of the night, which meant she was either backdating the violations or creating new ones to justify the escalation. Either way, it was proof of intent, and it was enough to flip the power dynamic if I used it right. But I did not reveal it yet. I waited for the right audience, because the reveal needed witnesses. The next escalation came faster than I expected. I got a call from the management company 4 days later. The woman on the phone sounded scripted. "Mister, your account has been flagged for immediate enforcement action. The board has authorized a tow of your vehicle if it is parked in the community overnight without current compliance status. You have 24 hours to resolve the outstanding fines, or your vehicle will be towed at your expense." I asked what compliance status meant. She said it meant payment of all outstanding fines and fees. I asked what fees, and she rattled off a list. $250 for the original violation, $500 for failure to respond, $100 for administrative processing, and $75 for the attorney letter. The total was $925, and it had to be paid by cashier's check or money order. I told her I was disputing all of it and I had requested a hearing. She said the hearing request had been denied because I did not submit it within the required time frame. I asked what the required time frame was, and she said 10 days from the original notice. I told her the original notice had no date on it, and she said that was not her problem. I hung up and called an attorney. I found one who specialized in HOA disputes, and I paid for a 1-hour consult. She listened to the whole story, reviewed my photos and the timeline, and then leaned back in her chair. "You have a good case," she said. "The board is violating their own procedures, the notices are defective, and the lien threat is premature. But here is the issue. Fighting this in court will cost you more than the fines, and it will take months. The faster option is to go to the next board meeting, present your evidence, and force them to back down in public. If you have witnesses and documentation, they will fold." "What if they do not?" I asked. "Then you file a complaint with the state and you sue for harassment and improper enforcement," she said. "But most HOA boards are run by people who do not want the liability. If you make it clear you have proof of wrongdoing, they will settle." I thanked her and left. I had 1 week until the next board meeting, and I had to make sure I had everything ready. But Patricia did not wait for the meeting. 2 nights before the scheduled date, I came home at 8 and found a tow truck idling in the parking lot near my assigned space. The driver was standing next to my car with a clipboard, and Patricia was pacing near the rear bumper, talking on her phone. I parked in a guest spot and walked over. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Enforcing the covenants," Patricia said. "Your vehicle is subject to tow under the winter compliance program." "There is no winter compliance program," I said. "I checked the handbook." "The board has discretion," she said. "You signed the covenants, now you live the covenants." The tow driver looked between us. He was a big guy in a reflective vest, and he looked annoyed. "Sir, do you live here?" "Yes," I said. "That is my car, and I am current on all dues." He looked at Patricia. "Ma'am, I need documentation. I cannot tow without a signed authorization from the owner or the association management." "I have authorization," Patricia said. She pulled a sheet of paper from her clipboard and handed it to him. He squinted at it under the truck's work light, then shook his head. "This is not signed by management," he said. "This is signed by you. I need a management authorization or a police order." Patricia's face turned red. "I am the vice president of the board. I have the authority to authorize enforcement actions." "Not according to my contract," he said. "I am not towing this vehicle without proper documentation." She started arguing with him, her voice rising. I pulled out my phone and started recording again. The driver noticed and stepped back. "I am leaving," he said. "If you want this tow, call my company and get the proper paperwork. I am not doing this without coverage." He got in his truck and drove off. Patricia turned to me, her face twisted with fury. "You think you are clever," she said. "You think you can ignore the rules and get away with it. But I do not need proof. I have paperwork and vibes." I stared at her. "Paperwork and vibes?" She did not answer. She turned and walked toward her car, her key ring jangling loudly. I stood there in the freezing fog watching her leave, and I realized she had just handed me the boomerang line I needed. The next morning I went to the management company office. I brought the binder with the timeline, the photos, the notices, and Rick's doorbell footage. I also brought a printed copy of the email chain where the management company admitted they could not find a winter compliance program in the handbook. The receptionist looked nervous when I walked in. "I need to speak to someone about Northwind Meadows," I said. She picked up the phone and spoke quietly, then hung up. "Someone will be with you in a minute." A man in a polo shirt came out from the back. He looked like he had been interrupted mid-lunch. "Can I help you?" "I want a copy of the winter compliance program," I said. "And I want to know why I am being fined for a violation that does not exist in the covenants." He sighed and motioned me into a small conference room. I followed him, and he sat down across from me. "Look, the board has broad authority to enforce community standards. If you have a dispute, you need to take it up with them." I slid the binder across the table. "I have a dispute with the process. The notices have no dates. The fines were issued without a hearing. The board authorized a tow without management approval. And the vice president is placing notices on my door in the middle of the night to justify escalation. I have video." He opened the binder and flipped through the pages. His expression changed. "Where did you get this?" "My neighbor's doorbell camera," I said. "The timestamp is clear, and I have emails from your office confirming the winter compliance program does not exist." He closed the binder and rubbed his face. "This is a board issue. We manage the financials and the common areas, but enforcement is their responsibility." "Then you need to tell them to stop," I said, "because if this goes to court, your company is on the paperwork." He looked at me for a long moment, then stood up. "I will make a call. Wait here." He left the room. I sat there for 15 minutes listening to muffled voices from the hallway. When he came back, he looked tired. "The board president wants to meet with you," he said. "Tomorrow night, before the regular meeting. Off the record." I shook my head. "No off the record. I want this on the agenda, in public, with minutes." He hesitated, then nodded. "I will see what I can do." I left the office and drove to work, my phone buzzing with a low battery warning. I plugged it in and checked my messages. Rick had sent another text. "Patricia just posted in the neighborhood group chat that she is bringing a formal motion to suspend your access to the gate system pending resolution of the violations. People are pissed." I typed back. "Good. Let them be pissed. I want as many people at the meeting as possible." The board meeting was held in a rented community room at a local library. I showed up 20 minutes early and found 30 people already there, most of them neighbors I recognized from the block. Rick waved me over and handed me a coffee. "Everyone is talking about you," he said. "Patricia tried to get the meeting moved to a private session, but the board president shot her down." "Good," I said. The board filed in at 7. Patricia was wearing her lanyard and carrying a thick binder of her own. She sat at the head table and did not look at me. The board president, an older man named Ed, called the meeting to order and went through the standard business. Then he looked at me. "We have a request from a homeowner to address a dispute regarding winter enforcement actions," he said. "The floor is yours." I stood up and walked to the front. I placed my binder on the table and opened it to the first page. "My name is on file, I live at the address on file, and I have been a homeowner here for 5 weeks," I said. "In that time, I have received multiple notices for violations that do not exist in the covenants. I have been threatened with liens and towing, and I have been harassed by a board member who placed notices on my door in the middle of the night to create a paper trail. Patricia stood up. That is a lie. I issued notices during normal business hours. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the projector. The screen lit up with the doorbell footage. The timestamp read 1:14 in the morning. Patricia's face was visible as she zip-tied a notice to my door handle. The room went silent. Patricia's face turned white, then red. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I also have emails from the management company confirming that the winter compliance program does not exist, I said. I have photos showing the violations were resolved the same day they were observed. And I have witness testimony from multiple neighbors who have been targeted by the same enforcement campaign. Ed looked at Patricia. Cynthia, is this accurate? She grabbed her binder and started flipping through pages. I have documentation. I have the authority to issue notices under the board's discretion clause. Then her phone buzzed. She looked down at the screen, and her face went blank. She tried to unlock it, but the phone did not respond. She shook it, then set it on the table. It stayed dark. I continued. I also requested a hearing, which was denied without explanation. I was told I missed the deadline, but the original notice had no date. I was sent an attorney letter threatening foreclosure, but the board never held a hearing to authorize the fines. And 2 nights ago, the vice president attempted to have my vehicle towed without management authorization. Ed looked at the other board members. They looked at each other. One of them, a woman in her 50s, raised her hand. I was not aware of any of this, she said. I was not consulted on the enforcement actions. Neither was I, said the man sitting next to her. Ed turned to Patricia. Cynthia, did you issue these notices and authorize the tow on your own authority? She stood there, frozen. Her phone was still dark on the table. She looked at it, then at me, then at Ed. I have the authority, she said quietly. I do not need proof. I have paperwork and vibes. The room erupted. People were shouting questions, and Rick stood up in the back. She said the same thing to me last month, he shouted. She fined me $300 for ice on my sidewalk after the city plow pushed snow onto my property. Someone else stood up. She fined me for a snowblower in my driveway. Another person. She threatened to tow my car because my guest parked in a visitor spot overnight. Ed banged his hand on the table. Everyone, please, we will address this in order. He turned back to Patricia. Cynthia, I need you to provide documentation for every enforcement action you issued in the last 60 days. If you acted outside the board's authority, we will need to review those actions. Patricia grabbed her binder and clutched it to her chest. I acted within the covenants. You signed the covenants, now you live the covenants. I pulled out the final page from my binder. It was a printout from the state HOA registry. According to this, the board held 3 enforcement votes in December, I said. But the registry shows that 2 of those votes did not have a quorum. That means the enforcement actions were invalid. Ed's face went pale. Where did you get this? Public records, I said. The board is required to report votes to the state within 30 days. I checked the filings. The board voted to authorize winter enforcement on December 3rd, but only 3 board members were present. You need 4 for a quorum. The room exploded again. Ed stood up and raised his hand. We are going to recess for 15 minutes, he said. Board members, please stay. Everyone else, we will reconvene shortly. The crowd filed out. I stayed in my seat. Patricia sat at the table, staring at her dead phone. Ed leaned over and spoke to her quietly. I could not hear what he said, but her face crumpled. When the meeting reconvened, Ed addressed the room. After reviewing the evidence presented tonight, the board has determined that several enforcement actions were issued without proper authorization, he said. Effective immediately, all winter compliance fines issued since December 1st are suspended pending a full audit. The board will also implement new procedures to ensure that all enforcement actions are reviewed and approved by a majority vote before notices are issued. He paused. Additionally, the board has accepted the resignation of Vice President Cynthia Wilson, effective immediately. Patricia stood up and walked out. She did not look at anyone. The room stayed silent until the door closed behind her. Ed continued. Homeowners who were fined under the Winter Compliance Program will receive automatic refunds within 30 days. The board will also publish updated enforcement standards and timelines to all homeowners by the end of the month. If you have questions, please submit them in writing to the management company. Rick stood up. What about the quorum issue? Ed nodded. We are conducting a full audit of all board votes from the last 6 months. Any actions taken without a quorum will be declared invalid and reversed. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. People came up to thank me and Rick clapped me on the shoulder. You just saved everyone $1,000, he said. I drove home and sat in my car for a few minutes, the heater running. My phone buzzed with messages from neighbors, but I did not read them. I just stared at the snow piled along the curb and felt the weight lift off my chest. 2 weeks later, I received a check for $925 with a letter of apology from the management company. The letter also included a lawyer letter that forces a retraction and a refund for the attorney fees. A second letter arrived from the board president, explaining that Karen is ordered to stop contacting the narrator directly, and that the HOA must publish standards and timelines to all homeowners. The new procedures were posted on the community website, and they included clear definitions, timelines, and an appeals process. Patricia moved out 3 months later. I heard she tried to run for a board position in another community and got rejected after someone found the video online. Rick still sends me updates, and the neighborhood group chat is a lot quieter now. I still keep the binder in my closet, just in case. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.